Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Path to Production is Dark and Full of Terrors, a hero's journey through Terraform, DevEx, and the Infrastructure Lifecycle. And especially since it is late in the day live, even though still shout out to the folks watching this later. Thanks so much for taking the time and joining me today. My name is Jacob Lick, and I use he, him pronouns. And for the past 15 years, my career has been a deeply personal journey through the infrastructure world. Starting out as an SRE in the trenches, moving into a solutions architect role where I designed and built out complex systems and then added a sprinkling of chaos and tested it again. Then transitioning to DevRel, which was all about telling stories to engineers. Now I'm a senior TPMM at HashiCorp, which, if we're being honest, is just code for I still get to tell stories about infrastructure. Speaking of stories, fun fact, I'm also immersed in writing an epic fantasy novel on the side. That creative journey has led me to really deep into studying narrative design, understanding how compelling stories are built, how heroes are formed, and how challenges are overcome. Through that unique lens, I realized that there was a fascinating, often untold story right in front of us in our daily work. The story of infrastructure itself and our journey through it. So here we are, because today I want to tell you that very story. So it's not about products, it's about people. About understanding what it truly means to go from just surviving infrastructure to build something durable, clear, and human. About how we map the seemingly dark and terrifying path to production into something navigable and, dare I say, even enjoyable for everyone involved. It was 3:12 in the morning, the kind of hour where time feels broken, too late to still be working, and too early to quit. I was sitting under these fluorescent lights in an empty office, rooted into one of our patching servers, fingers crossed, running these VMware Power CLI scripts to patch infrastructure I didn't even build successfully. No one knew who actually owned it, but when it broke, everyone knew who to blame. Hi, that's me. There were no policies, no Terraform, no real feedback loops, scattered credentials, and that awful pit in your stomach only cured by the vague hope that if I copied the last working command and hoped long and hard enough, maybe the big fulfillment center wouldn't call me at 5 in the morning and tell me that something was broken and everything's on fire and everything's down. That's the difference between, also the difference between success and total oblivion was a comma. True story. That was the normal for me. And the thing is, many of us still live in that kind of normal. So that's where our story and the path truly begins. So this is me, blurred out, much less gray hair, clearly, half lit, had to wave my hands in the air to get the lights to acknowledge my very existence. 5 hours earlier, 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night. Back then, I worked overnight shifts from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Patching these systems on Wednesdays by myself was just my normal. Over 10,000 servers in the enterprise. One person, me. I didn't even know Terraform existed yet. I was running these Power CLI scripts against infrastructure I didn't build and no one wanted to maintain because, frankly, who had the time? So much so that the week before I took it over, I found out that we were only patching production. Dev, QC, at least a year behind, sometimes never patched. No one wanted to own it, and production had to be patched for PCI compliance. Oh, and verification was really easy, by the way. Just wait for all the red alerts to clear. And if they didn't clear, log into those servers and see what services still weren't coming off for some reason. Then restart those or the boxes again. Surely this time will be different. What's that saying go about insanity? Oh, and every time something broke, I scrambled to find the right log file, the right credential, the right duct tape. That wasn't DevOps. That was surviving. The funny part, at the time, I thought I was being efficient. I got us all caught up patching-wise in the lore environments. And now I look back and realize that I was just being held together by institutional memory and duct tape. The systems worked until they didn't, but we weren't solving the problem. We were just surviving it. But this image, this story for many is still what ownership looks like. So in 1937, J.R.R. Tolkien introduced us to a character named Bilbo Baggins, a creature of comfort, utterly content in his quiet Shire home. He didn't seek adventure. He was quite content with his perfectly normal, predictable Hobbiton life. But then he was dragged into an adventure far bigger than he ever imagined. And in many ways, that's been the journey of infrastructure as code. When ISC first arrived on the scene, it felt revolutionary. It felt like that unexpected party at your doorstep. We were Bilbo. Our comfortable manual command line routines gone. We were asked to step into something profoundly new: version control for infrastructure, repeatability, structured code, embracing calculated risk. But here's the truth. Many teams, after taking a few tentative steps outside the shower, maybe they wrote a module or two, automating a small pipeline, and then circled right back home, stepped right back into the shower. It wasn't out of laziness. It was often out of exhaustion, out of the fear of the unknown complexity, or due to unclear return on investment. They started the journey, but they never truly finished it. As we learned from our discussions, isn't just about technical adoption, but overcoming the cultural and emotional hurdles of significant change. It's not that we've had Terraform for 10 years. It's that in those 10 years, too many organizations started this journey and then quietly stopped. The next leap isn't solely technical anymore. It's emotional, it's cultural. So this talk isn't just about introducing Terraform. It's about understanding why so many teams never got past that front porch and what happens when you decide to fully commit to the path. Speaking of that, we have to ask ourselves why this is the case. We've been talking about Infra as code for 10 years, but the real problem wasn't the code. Not really. The syntax was solvable. The concepts were learnable. The true obstacles lay in everything around the code. It was the lack of support, the absence of clear communication, the lack of clarity. Most critically, the lack of emotional and organizational safety to see that change through. When every mistake is amplified, when every experiment feels like a risk to your job, people retreat to what's safe. So it's not just about whether your team has Terraform. It's about whether they believe they're empowered and allowed to truly build something better, to innovate and to change these entrenched processes without fear of blame. The hero in our story isn't the developer trying to just deploy their application. It's the SRE. It's the platform team, the ones who are still patching infrastructure at 3 a.m., who get paged for those frustrating failed deploys, and who, despite all of that, still have the monumental task of making the entire process feel easy and reliable for the teams they support. Now, the developer's pain is the catalyst, the initial call to adventure that lands on their desk. But the platform team's courageous response and their journey to build a better, clearer path, that's the narrative we're charting today. Eventually, we all hit a wall. The sheer volume of manual tasks, the rising complexity, the constant firefighting, the endless cycle of just one more ticket, it all became pretty unsustainable. Duct tape simply doesn't scale to the demands of modern infrastructure. The friction wasn't merely technical, it became profoundly emotional. Trust eroding within teams, between ops and development, even within individuals who felt held hostage by these brittle, unpredictable systems. No one trusted the process anymore because it was opaque and unforgiving, if it existed at all. There were no clear handoffs for infrastructure changes, no shared clarity on who owned what, no feedback loops when things went wrong. And when things inevitably failed, it wasn't a learning opportunity. It was just silent, widespread chaos. That constant cycle of survival mode, this normal we accepted, had to end. The journey towards true infrastructure maturity couldn't truly begin without a clear, collective decision to change that normal forever. So, since this talk is tied to the hero's journey, let's talk our table of contents, or rather our map for the road ahead. The map is what the SRE hero builds to guide others out of chaos, and it's really critical for navigating the complexities of infrastructure lifecycle management. So we've already visited the patch where we started in the dark, experiencing the raw, unowned pain of infrastructure. That sets our emotional stage. Next, we'll dive into the call and the threshold, that pivotal moment when the SRE hero answers the call of developer pain and steps into the structured world and infrastructure as code. This is where our foundational tools begin to make true sense. Then we'll meet the mentor, policy as code, which guides us rather than just blocking us, instilling best practices and safety from the outset of every change. Every journey has its challenges, and ours is the ordeal, where we'll confront friction head on in a walkthrough, showing the immediate path from failure to a smooth flow. The outcome of facing those challenges, the reward, achieving true trust, comprehensive visibility, and accelerating speed in our infrastructure delivery processes. And finally, we'll reflect on the return, bringing back the valuable lessons and actionable takeaways for your own teams to achieve platform maturity and transform their normal forever. Lots to do. So this is the very first fundamental tool our SRE hero picks up, Infra as code, Terraform in this case. It didn't fix everything overnight. No single tool ever does, but it radically changed the center of gravity in how we manage infrastructure. It introduced a core, repeatable, and transparent workflow. In case you're unfamiliar, you write your desired state in a human-readable configuration language like HCL. Terraform then helps you clearly plan the exact changes it would make to your infrastructure, giving you a comprehensive preview. And then you apply those changes finally, and Terraform provisions or modifies your resources across virtually any cloud or service with an API consistently and repeatedly. This conceptual workflow directly replaces our ad hoc scripts, our manual clicks, and our, let's face it, frantic uncertainty that characterized my normal. I finally had a way to version changes, to share context across teams. I could stop patching for survival and truly start building with intent. It didn't necessarily make things easier in the short term, but as it required, new skills and processes, but it made things profoundly clearer. And that clarity, that fundamental shift from reactive firefighting to proactive intentional design is precisely where the real journey towards a mapped path truly begins for our SRE hero. Now, as we scale our infra as code adoption, a single monolithic configuration quickly becomes really unwieldy and confusing. So this is the terror of unbounded configurations, trying to manage everything in one massive file. Even with basic IAC, attempting to orchestrate vast interconnected systems in one place leads to bottlenecks, slows down progress, and ultimately breaks down trust in the system. So for an SRE, taming this complexity means decomposing the system for clarity and strong isolation. This isn't just about organizing state. It's about creating separate, independent Terraform configurations that align with logical architectural boundaries within your system. Think of it as breaking one giant overwhelming problem into smaller, manageable, and independent, deployable services or components. So, for example, instead of trying to put your entire cloud footprint, your network, your databases, your applications into one massive Terraform project, please don't do that. You create these separate, well-defined configurations. One for your core network infrastructure, another for your shared database services, individual configurations for different application services, or even distinct configurations for your development versus your production environments. Each of these become its own distinct Terraform project with its own state, its own lifecycle, and its own clear boundaries. This crucial step allows different teams to manage distinct components of the system separately, often with their own unique credentials and access controls. It's a really essential move to ensure that changes in one part of your infra don't inadvertently impact another, building both safety and trust overall. Now, once you've decomposed this infrastructure into these distinct configurations, the next step for our SRE hero is to introduce reusable patterns through modules. Modules becomes your blueprint for repeatable, scalable creation of infrastructure. So think of the SRE or platform team as the producers. They build vetted, approved, secured, and standardized infrastructure as code modules. These modules pretty much are best practices, security defaults, compliance requirements, and organizational standards into these simple consumable blocks. They can then publish these modules into an internal registry, a shared library, if you will, for easy discovery and consumption across the org. Then you have your developers, your consumers. Instead of writing complex custom IAC for every new service or environment, they simply consume these pre-built approved modules. They provision standard infra components without having to write these extensive Terraform code themselves. So this workflow increases agility and developers can provision what they need rapidly. Makes them happy. It lowers risk because best practices and security are baked directly into the modules from the start. And it can reduce costs by minimizing wasteful over-provisioning and eliminating duplicate effort across a bunch of different teams. So this is where we start to see that friction into flow start to really build. So Well, Terraform brought us this incredible power in codifying our infrastructure, and our SRE hero started to decompose complexity and building reusable modules. A realization really set in. IC alone wasn't the final destination. It solved the problem of repeatability, ensuring we could deploy the same thing multiple times consistently, but it didn't solve the larger systemic challenge of end-to-end infrastructure delivery at scale. There was still that nagging sense of drift where configurations would silently fall out of sync with reality. There was still fear of breaking things with every deploy, fear of failing compliance audits, fear of making costly mistakes that would impact the business. And that persistent chaos between merge of code and the actual successful prod deployment remains a constant source of anxiety and unpredictability. So as our SRE hero continues their journey, it becomes really clear that foundational ISC was necessary and powerful, but not sufficient to navigate all the deep terrors of the true path to production. The journey needed to go deeper. It required more layers of guidance, automation, and feedback loops beyond just the code itself. This is the part no one warns you about when they talk about IAC adoption. This is where the simple IAC map ends and the real wilderness, the true trial of the hero's journey begins. It's no longer about writing code. It's about the absence of audit trails that leave you blind to changes. It's the overly broad access control or the critical lack of them that creates these gaping security vulnerabilities. It's the rollbacks that don't work as expected, turning a quick fix into a new compounding disaster. It's the silent drift that accumulates until your infrastructure no longer matches your code, leading to unexpected outages. And yes, it's the organizational politics, the entrenched silos, and the unclear ownership that turn every seemingly simple step into this bureaucratic minefield. The technical path to a truly mature production environment exists, but it's littered with these kinds of hidden traps. That's why so many teams never truly finish this journey from writing basic IAC to achieving true production readiness, operational excellence, and honestly, peace of mind. They get stuck navigating these terrors by themselves. But there's a breakthrough here. There's a guiding principle that helps our SRE hero illuminate this seemingly dark path. Clarity beats control. People don't adopt tools in a vacuum. They adopt them because those tools are designed to bring profound clarity to a previously opaque, frustrating, or risky process. Again, if it even exists. They adopt clarity enabled by the right solutions, not just features or raw automation. If you simply automate chaos, you only achieve faster chaos. Yay! Automation without shared context, without continuous feedback, without clear understanding of outcomes, simply accelerates the problems you already have. The solution isn't to micromanage or control every single step centrally. It's to fundamentally make the path itself inherently understandable, transparent, and trustworthy. Building these clear pathways for infra delivery, fostering shared ownership across dev and ops teams, and implementing these trusted guardrails that guide and inform rather than just block without explanation, that's how our SRE hero truly scales platform thinking. That's how you transform the terrors from these insurmountable obstacles into manageable challenges that your entire team can confidently navigate together. So let's revisit the beginning of our hero's journey into our next chapter, the call to adventure. It often starts with a seemingly simple request. A developer just needs some infrastructure for their new application or feature. Perhaps it's a Jira ticket that lands in your backlog and an impatient Slack message or a pull request for a new service or environment. But this call is a catalyst for our journey, the SRE or platform team. How do we respond? Do we just throw more tickets back at the problem, creating more friction and delay? Do we resort to providing another brittle manual script or a confusing documentation page? Or do we build a better, more automated and clearer path? It's a path rooted in real developer experience, not just abstract technical perfection. This isn't just about developer satisfaction. It's about accelerating time to value for the business. The better the developer experience, the faster we ship, the quicker the business can innovate. The developer's pain is the initial spark. The platform's team's courageous response and their journey to build a better path, that's the narrative we're charting here. We see our soon-to-be hero Bilbo and Gandalf, the mentor, Here, speaking of, what about the mentor, our Gandalf the Grey? In our story, that powerful guiding figure is policy as code. It's the embodiment of these organizational best practices and governance powered by tools like HashiCorp Sentinel or Open Policy Agent. Too often, security, compliance, and governance functions are perceived by developers as roadblocks, are trolls under the bridge, pay the toll, as a series of these manual gates that slow down innovation. But what if guardrails didn't feel like gates? What if they felt like guidance? By embedding policies directly into the provisioning workflow of your infrastructure, we automate reviews and approvals right where the code is being changed. This shifts the process left, providing immediate feedback. A policy can automatically check for things like missing mandatory tags, the use of unimproved cloud regions, or insecure network configurations. We've all been there with security groups. This means the feedback is immediate, clear, and actionable. It's not friction that frustrates, it's feedback that educates. It ensures security and compliance are part of the developer's immediate loop, transforming perceived blockers into these powerful guides on their journey. Our compass for navigating the path, and truly a critical piece of the SRE Heroes toolkit, is a tight VCS integration. Version control systems like GitHub and GitLab or Azure DevOps are no longer just for application code, right? They're the central nervous system for our infra as code. When Terraform is seamlessly linked to your VCS, it automatically triggers runs and policy checks upon pull requests and merges. This is foundational for transforming the entire delivery pipeline. It provides automated versioning of your infra code, just like application code, and creates a full audit trail and rollback capability. More importantly, it embeds policy checks directly into the pull request workflow. This provides continuous and immediate feedback to developers, shifting the detection of issues much earlier in the cycle, where they're frankly cheaper and a lot easier to fix. This dramatically reduces manual effort, minimizes errors by catching them upstream, and empowers developers with a constant, actionable feedback right within their familiar environment. It's what transforms a slow, manual, ticket-driven process into something smooth, a self-service pathway that significantly increases agility and lowers risk. This also addresses the friction points in VCS adoption and Terraform workflow onboarding that we've seen, and where teams get stuck not because the code is wrong, but because the path to Terraform isn't clear. Now, let's walk through what this journey feels like from the perspective of our SRE hero, guiding a developer through a common ordeal. Our theoretical map meeting the practical challenge, where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. A change is introduced to our infrastructure as code. Perhaps it's a new feature, a critical update, or a simple refactor. This change then triggers an automated Terraform workload, runs on our platform, initiating the process. So we illustrate the fundamental pattern of immediate and actionable feedback that an SRE designs into our systems. This is about understanding how a well-architected system can guide developers from initial confusion to ultimate clarity, regardless of the specific underlying tool or provider of the cloud. It's about building a pathway for success, not just for the code, but for the people using it, creating a human-centric infrastructure delivery process. So first, we'll see the friction in that moment where policy acts as a mentor that says, not quite that way. Then we'll immediately see the clarity, how a small, simple adjustment turns a seemingly blocked path into a clear, open one. So here's how it plays out in the real world. That Terraform workflow runs, initiated by the new code proceeds, and then this. The system, acting as our mentor, highlights that policy checks failed. And crucially, it provides a reason. In this example, perhaps the required tags policy failed because a resource was missing a mandatory team tag. This isn't a vague error message, it's explicit guidance. This policy as code effectively blocks the deploy. But it's not just a wall, it's a guidepost. It tells the developer why it failed and what to do next. The system, acting as our mentor, highlights, already got the part. This policy as code, lost my train of thought. There we go. This isn't friction, by the way. This isn't friction that frustrates and creates resentment. It's feedback that educates and empowers. You're not going to get a separate ticket, no frantic Slacks asking for help. They understand the lesson and the direct path forward. And in that moment for the developer trying to push their code, it feels kind of like this. But here's the crucial difference and why policy as code is our mentor, not our enemy. This isn't a permanent, frustrating roadblock. This isn't permission denied with no context. This is, you shall not pass. I'll work on my Gandalf a little later. Comes with a clear reason, a guide. It's, you shall not pass until it's right. The policy, our mentor, explicitly tells them why and shows them the correct way forward, protecting both them and the system from potential errors. So, with that clear guidance from our policy mentor, thank you, Gandalf, the developer makes the simple fix, addressing the violation. They trigger another run, and the system responds immediately. Da-da-da-da! Now is plan successful. All policy checks have passed. The plan is sound, and the apply is ready. And let's be honest, we all feel really good when we see that little green check mark. That's it. One small change. And now the developer feels like the platform has their back, not coming for them. The SRE has transformed a moment of this initial friction into a moment of clarity and empowerment, proving that a thoughtfully designed system truly guides them. That's the power of a thoughtfully designed workflow. It's the same tool, the same intent from the developer, but now it's not a dead end. It's a clear pathway, a journey that they want to stay on because it empowers them to move forward safely and efficiently, building trust in every step. After an ordeal like that, for the developer, it's not about just the successful deploy, it's a shift in their experience. They now feel things like this. Now, these aren't real quotes, but they could be, because when a developer understands the why and the system gives them clarity instead of confusion, they say things like this. Now, some of you might be thinking, that was a small fix, a simple tag, a single policy check, and you'd be right. But that's the point, and the profound power of this approach. This isn't about showing off complex, opaque solutions. This is about ensuring that even complex problems, when they inevitably arise, present themselves as small, clear, solvable fixes. That's the magic. It seems like a small intervention to us, but it's where the real work of the SRE hero truly happens. It's about cultivating belief, confidence, and autonomy within the developer community that you have. Because without belief, there's no adoption. Without clarity, there's no progress. And without a compelling narrative about how things work, there's no trust. Infrastructure only gets noticed when it's failing. That's our branding problem as platform teams. But when we make the journey clear, when we tell the story of guidance and partnership, the platform then transforms from an opaque gatekeeper into a trusted partner, not a black box. So this is the real infrastructure lifecycle, I feel like. It's the elixir, if you will, of maturity that our SRE hero brings back from their journey, integrating all the elements we've discussed for a system of trust, visibility, and speed. Now, from codifying our infrastructure with modules and consistency with policies and integrating version control for our workflows, setting clear boundaries, continuously monitoring for drift, it ensures that your actual state always matches your desired state, automatically flagging inconsistencies that can then be brought back under management and then corrected. It all builds towards this unified approach. So we're not just building infrastructure, we're building a cohesive, self-organizing system that scales across your organization. This is what allows platform teams to empower developers with confidence while maintaining essential control and predictability. It's what you get when you finish the journey, when you truly map the path, not just start it. So this is where the work really is. And we've been having this conversation about AAC for years. Yet, so many engineers still feel stuck. As I mentioned, that's our branding problem as platform teams. But when we make the journey clearer, we tell that story of guidance and partnership, that's where things really open up. By the way, this is how narrative clarity helps the business too. When developers understand what to do and why it matters, things move faster, not just because the tech works, but because the humans believe in it. By the way, you might be the only one in your org that thinks this way right now, and that's okay. After all, the hero is often alone at the start. That's where the greatest impact begins. Every movement starts with someone who steps out of the norm, and you're that someone. So as we bring our hero's journey to a close, remember this. The path to production doesn't have to be dark and full of terrors forever. You don't need a massive budget, a huge team, or a whole new platform to start this. Your journey is critical. You're charting the course for your organization. You just need the right mindset, a clear map, and the strategic tools that can draw the map for you. You just need to take that first step outside the shower of your current normal. Now, if you forget everything that I said, it's late. It's getting late in the evening on the East Coast here. Just remember the one thing. Pick one pain point in your organization and reframe it as a story. Is it a chaotic patching night like mine? Is it a developer stuck waiting for access? Is it a vague error message that frustrates everybody? Then take that pain point and apply the principles we've discussed. Clarity instead of ambiguity. A guided path instead of a roadblock. Show, don't just tell. Narrative 101, by the way. How the system can feel when it works. Go be that person who brings the torchlight. Map that next mile of road. Your clarity, your story will be the map for others. You have the tools. Now, empower people to tell better stories with them and make sure that they are the right tools to tell those stories clearly and consistently. So what actually moves the needle isn't just adding tools for the sake of it. It's about leveraging the right tools for clarity, creating this narrative around your infrastructure. So the power of ISC isn't just in the code itself. It's the clarity of experience that it enables. And Terraform truly works best when the entire infra journey is mapped, guided, and automated end-to-end. Policy as code isn't just rigid enforcement, it's narrative scaffolding, providing the structure and guidance that transforms these systems from red tape into a clear path forward. And ultimately, developers don't just need more tools. They need tools that tell better stories about how infra works and how changes are governed and how they can build with confidence. That's where the design of our platforms truly shines in this really cool human-centric way. You don't need a whole new platform to start. You just need to be the person who maps the next mile of the road. You have the tools. Let's go. Thanks for spending some time with me. I really appreciate it. You can follow me on the Twitters, the Instas, the Blue Skies, all other socials at Duval King Jacob. Email me, find me on LinkedIn. If you want the slides, they're already, I believe they should be up on Speaker Deck right now. And if there are any questions, I'll stop sharing and see. Ooh, a question, yes. What were some of the biggest turning points or boss battles you encountered when trying to improve developer experience with Terraform at scale? Education is really the first thing that comes to mind to me, because this goes back to my point earlier around the talk. People are very happy with the status quo and staying in their box, and so you really have to focus on the talking about the promised land and building towards it, but also reminding them that Rome wasn't built in a day, and our lives will be happier if we do something like this. Next question. Good question. How do you balance the need for developer autonomy with the guardrails required for safe infrastructure changes in a Terraform-driven environment? So, kind of a similar answer. Education. The problem, especially earlier in my SRE career, when I was building or trying to have relationships with security teams, I never got the answer of why. Why are we doing this? A great example is having security groups open to the entire world makes isn't great, right? But why? Now, that might seem like a simple question to answer, or someone on the development team should understand that. But this is an example of they probably aren't thinking of stuff like that because they're focused on what? Their code. Because in many cases, code is life. So that would be where I would start. What's the worst thing that's ever happened when you push something into production with Terraform? Oh, man. So the worst thing that's ever happened to me when I pushed something into production with Terraform wasn't with Terraform, actually. It was the joke I made earlier about the comma. We didn't have everything automated, not everything. And our load balancer was still very manual. And so you had to actually we use blue-green deployments, and we actually had to take the old load balancer, or we take the new load balancer that we pushed up and replace it to make the website go, so to speak. And I added, actually it wasn't a comment, it was a preceding space, and I brought everything down. It was automated the next week. Pain works. But yeah, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to me with Terraform? I can't think of one. but I'm sure there's something that I just can't think of right now. It's a really fun question. Are there any others? I'm really happy with these questions. These are fun. And also feel free to, if you have like follow-ups on that, let me know. Hit me up on LinkedIn or wherever. I can be found pretty much everywhere. And if you can't hear that, that's my dog Cooper. So, all right, I guess that's everything. I'll give another, little bit for folks that have questions, but cool. All right. Well, have a good rest of your day, everyone.